Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Yusuf Shakeel and you are watching jQuery tutorial series. In this video, we are going to learn about the AJAX method. And we'll be using the AJAX method to call a server and fetch data from the server. And guys, all the code that we are going to write in this video, I'll put them in my GitHub repository. And the notes will be there on my website dyclassroom.com. You will find all the important links in the YouTube video description, so please feel free to check that out. And guys, if you haven't already, then please subscribe my channel by clicking that subscribe button. And don't forget to click that bell icon so that you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Alright guys, let's get started. Alright, I have opened the project folder in Sublime Text. And inside the project folder, I have created a new file, ajax.html, which is this one. And I have written the following HTML. And inside the JS folder, I have created a new file, ajax.js, which is this one. And I've included this ajax.js file inside this HTML file by writing the script tag and setting the src to js/ajax.js. And I have also included this jQuery. Now let us save this file and open it in Chrome. So we'll open the project folder and then we'll open this ajax.html file. And we'll also open the DevTools. So we'll go to View, Developer, and we'll select the DevTools. And we'll switch to this console tab. And since this is empty, that means we don't have any error. And for this tutorial, I'm using a localhost server, which I have installed on my machine. And the API that we are going to call is localhost/API/user. And it gives us list of users. Alright. So when we'll make a request to this API using AJAX method, we'll get back this response, which is an object. You can see this curly brackets. And if we get a success, then the response will contain this success text, which will be an object. And you can see it contains 5 items. Inside this success, we get a data, which is an array because we have square bracket, and it contains 10 items. Then we have page, which tells us that we are at page number 1. And then we have page limit, which is 10. That means max 10 records or 10 items we can fetch. And fetched is 10. That means we have fetched 10 items from the server. And total record is 15. That means there are total 15 records in the server. Now, if we make a request to a page where there is no data, we'll get error. So for example, if we make an API call to our API, localhost/API/user, and we pass page number 10, and let's say page limit is 10, we'll get error, no data. And inside this data array, we have the data of users. And each of the item of this array or each of the element of this array is an object. We can see the curly brackets. And inside this object, we have some key value pairs. So we have the ID of the user. Then we have the first name, last name, when was the data last modified, and when was it created. So we have ID1 for the first user, name Yusuf. Then we have ID2, second user, first name Daud. Then we have ID3, first name Suman. Then we have Saurabh, Iftika, Manish, Abhilash, Zakaria, Niaz, Aditya. Now this is the data for page 1 and the page limit is 10 and we have fetched 10 records and total record is 15. Now let's go ahead and make an API call to page 2. We are going to call page 2. So we again get a success, and this time this data array contains 5 elements. We are on page 2 and the page limit is 10 and we have fetched total 5 records and total record is 15. And since we have fetched 5 records, that means that we have reached the end because we have already fetched 10 records in page 1 and in the second page we have fetched 5 records, so total 15. And if we make a call to the third page, we'll get no data. So for page number 2, we have the following user details. So we have Rukmani, Ashwin, Manisha, Shravanna, Uttara. So we have total 15 users in our database. Now if we make a call to page number 3, we get no data. So let us go back to page 1. So we'll be fetching this data from the server by calling this API, and we are going to perform this task using the AJAX method. And first we are going to show this data in the browser console, and then we'll write some logic to show it in the web page. All right. So we'll be using the AJAX method to make API calls. So for this we write $.ajax, and this takes an object, and the first property is URL, and this is the URL that we want to call, and in our case it is localhost/API/user. So we'll copy this. So we'll have this http://localhost/API/user. The next property is the type, which tells us the type of the call, and this can be a post request, it can be a put request, it can be a get request, and can be a delete request. We use the post request to insert data, we use the put request to update data, we use the get request to fetch data, and we use the delete request to delete the data. In our case, we are going to fetch the data, so we are going to make a get request. After this, we have the data property, and this is the data that we are sending to the server. In our case, we are sending page 1, and we are sending page limit 10. Then we have a success method, and the code inside this function gets executed when we have a success response from the server. And in case we have any error, then we have this error function. So if we get a success from the server, a success response, then the code inside this function will get executed. And in case we get any error response from the server, then the code inside this function will get executed. And in case of error, this jQXHR, this will contain the error type. This text status will contain the error status, like let's say timeout. And this error thrown will contain a text, let's say internal server error. Now let us go ahead and console log this data response from the server if we get a success response. So we'll console.log the response data from the server. And if we get an error response from the server, then for that, we will console log this 3 parameters. So console.log jQXHR. Let me copy this, paste it, text status, and error thrown. Now we'll save this file and we'll go back to Chrome. And now we are going to reload this page. And when we'll reload this page, this jQuery code will execute. And since we have this AJAX method, so we'll make a call to this URL or this API. And we are making a GET request, and we are passing 2 parameters. One is page, and it is set to 1. Then we have page limit, which is set to 10. So the server will receive this request and it will process it. It will fetch the data from the database and it will send back a response. And we are assuming that we'll get the success response. So on success, this data will contain the response from the server and will console log that data or that response from the server. So Let us go back to Chrome, reload this page, and we get some response from the server, and we have a success, which is an object, and inside this we have data, and it contains 10 items or 10 elements, and it is an array since we have this square bracket. So we are receiving the same response from the server when we called this API from our browser. And this data array contains all the details of the users. Now let us go ahead and make a request to page number 2. So we'll update this page to page number 2. We'll save, and we'll go back to Chrome and then reload, and we again get a success. And this time if we check, we have data and it contains 5 items. So it's an array and it contains 5 elements. We have fetched 5 records. We are on page 2, page limit is 10, and total record is 15. So we are receiving the same response from the server. Now let's go ahead and make a request to page number 3, and this time we are expecting an error. So let us clear the console, go back to our code and update this value to page 3. And we'll save the file, go back to Chrome and reload. And we get the error. So our code is working fine and we are receiving response from the server. So let us change this back to page number 1. And now let's work on the UI part. So we want to show, that is, we want to display this data in the web page. So maybe like a list of users. So inside our HTML file, inside the body, let's say we create a div, give it an ID, result. So we'll be appending all the data inside this div having ID, result. Now we want to check if this response contains a success property. So we'll have a if, and we'll check if we have data and it contains success. If this is true, then we'll take the data array, which is inside the success dot data. That means when we make a call to the API, we'll get back an object. This object will be saved inside this data. Now if this data contains a success property, that is data.success, then we want to get this data property of this success property. Now once we have this, we want to loop. So data array.length, and we want to loop till the last element, and we'll also have a HTML variable, and we are going to append, let's say, a div, and let's say we give it a class sample user. And inside this, let's say we have h3 element, and we are going to access the ith element of this data array. So we are going to write data array, and we access the ith element. So by writing this, we are targeting the ith element. So let's say if we are at 0, so we are targeting the first element of the array, which is at index 0. And since it is an object, we'll use the dot sign and then the property So let's say we want to show the ID. So we'll write dot ID. And inside this, we can write ID. And okay, I have missed the plus sign since we are concatenating this string to this HTML variable. So we need plus equal to. And after we complete this for loop, we want to append this HTML inside this div having ID result. So we'll first target that div by ID. So we'll write dollar round brackets within double quotes hash result. Then we'll call HTML and we'll pass the HTML. So we are calling the HTML method and we are setting the value inside this HTML variable inside this div. So now if we save this file and go back to Chrome and switch to our ajax.html file and reload, we get ID 1, 2, 3, 4 till 10. And this is the result from page 1. So we can also show the first name and last name. So let's go back to our code. And let's say we have a paragraph. Don't forget the plus sign. And inside this, we are going to now access the first name of the ith element of this data array. So we'll call the first name. Now if we save this file, go back to Chrome and reload, we are getting the first name. So first name of all the users. And we can also write first name. Similarly, we can copy this and we can have the last name. So last name. So we are accessing the ith element of this data array and we are accessing the last name. So we save this file, go back to Chrome, and if we reload, we get ID 1, first name is Yusuf, last name is Shakeel. Similarly, ID 2, first name Daud, last name Shakeel. ID 3, first name Suman, last name Ghosh. Similarly for ID 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. Now we can also add a horizontal line, so HR, and don't forget the plus sign. So if we now save the file, we get some horizontal line. We can also show the last modified and created timestamps. So let us go back to our code and let me copy this. Last modified at and created at. Last modified, created. So we save the file, go back to our Chrome and reload, and we get first name, last modified, created, and the ID. Now let's go ahead and add some previous and next button so that we can switch between page 1, page 2. So let's go back to our HTML file. And let's say before this div having ID result, we have another div having class. Let's say nav button container. And we have this nav button container div before and after the div having ID result. Now inside this divs, we'll have two buttons, one for previous, one for next. So let us go ahead and create a button and give it a class prev button. And we'll copy this and paste it inside this div. And let us go ahead and create another button and give it a class next button. And we'll also copy this and paste it inside this div. So if we save the file, go back to Chrome and reload, we get the previous button and we get the next button. These two buttons are at the top and as well as at the bottom. So we'll write some JavaScript to handle the click event for these two buttons. So when the user clicks this previous button, we'll fetch the data from the previous page. And if the user clicks the next button, we'll fetch the data from the next page. So inside our JS file, we are going to target this button having class priv-button. So handling the priv button. So we are going to target that button by class. So we'll use dot, then the class, and this is on click. And we'll have some code. Similarly, we are going to handle the next button. And we are going to target those button by class. So dot, then the class. And we are handling the click event. And we'll have some code. Now this page value will increase if we click the next button. And this page value will decrease when we click this previous button. So this will be a common value. So let us create a variable. And let us set this to page 1. And if we click the previous button, then first we'll check if page is greater than 0. Then we can decrease the value of page by 1. So we are using page minus minus. And in this case, if page into page limit is less than total record, then we can do page plus plus. So we'll need a page limit variable. So let us create one and set this to 10. And we'll need a total record variable. Initially it will be set to 0. And we are going to update this total record value inside this success function. So if we get a success, we are going to also save the total record. And if we go back to Chrome and see the API response, we can see that on success, this object contains a total record property. So we'll use data. Since this data is the response from the server, then we are accessing success. Then we are accessing total record. So we are saving that total record. And now, inside this page, we can console.log, let's say, previous page value. And inside the next, we can console.log the next page value. So if we save the file and go back to Chrome, and let us clear the console and reload, we get a success response from the server and the data is rendered on the page. Now, if we click the prev button, we are getting prev page is 0. Now this is an error, so let's go ahead and fix this. We cannot go below page 1. So initially this page is 1 and the logic should be page greater than 1. If the page is greater than 1, then we can go back 1 page. So now let us save this file, go back to Chrome, clear the console and reload. We again get back the success response and the data is entered on the page. Now if we click this brief button, we remain at page 1. Now if we click at next button, we are at page 2. If we click again, we cannot move beyond page 2 because there is no more data beyond page 2. That means our prev and next button logic is working fine. Now let us make some changes in the logic inside the JS file that is fetching this record. So if we go back to our JS file, and if the page is changed, we have to make a call to the fetch data. So let's say we create a function fetch data. And inside this function, we have this AJAX call. So we put our AJAX inside this function. Now, if we click on the previous button, and if the page is greater than 1, then we want to fetch the data from the previous page. So we'll call the fetch data method. Similarly, if we click the next button, and if this condition is satisfied, that is, if the total number of data fetched is less than the total record in the server, then we can update the page and we can call fetch data. And we also need to change this hard-coded value to page and page limit. So this page is this variable and this page limit is this page limit. Now, if we save this file and go back to Chrome and let us reload the page, we get no data. So we need to fix this. And the problem that we are facing at this moment is, since we have put this AJAX method inside a function, and when this code executes, this function is never called. So we don't get any data when that page loads. So we have to call the fetch data function at least once when we open the page. So if we save the file, go back to Chrome and reload, we get success response. Now if we click the prev button, we don't get any update. But if we click the next button, we get the data from the next page. And now if we click the next button again, we don't get any response because we cannot move beyond page number 2 as there is no data in page number 3. And if we click on the next, we again get back the data from the previous page. So we can jump between the two pages. Alright guys, this brings us to the end of this tutorial. I'll be putting all the notes on my website dyclassroom.com, and all the code that we have written in this tutorial series, I'll put them in my GitHub repository. And since we were using some data from the database table, I'll put that table and the data inside that table in my GitHub repository. You will find all the important links in the YouTube description, so please check that out. And guys, if you find my videos interesting, then please subscribe my channel by clicking that subscribe button, and don't forget to click that bell icon so that you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in my next video, and like always, stay happy and keep smiling. Bye.